Members of the Security Board, the so-called derogatory information in your indictment of me cannot be fairly understood except in the context of my life and my work.
Derogatory information. The word derogatory means showing a critical or disrespectful attitude toward someone or something. It is used to describe remarks, comments, or information that hurts someone's reputation or feelings. So, derogatory information would refer to negative, damaging, or unfavorable details about a person that could harm their reputation, character, or standing. By the term so-called derogatory information, Oppenheimer is referring to the negative accusations or evidence that the Security Board has presented. By saying so-called, he implies skepticism about the validity or interpretation of this information.
The so-called derogatory information in your indictment of me cannot be fairly understood except in the context of my life and my work.
Indictment. An indictment is a formal accusation or statement that someone has done something wrong or illegal. It doesn't necessarily mean the person is guilty, but signifies that they are being charged or accused of wrongdoing. So, in this scene, Oppenheimer is addressing the Security Board, saying that the negative, that is, derogatory, information they are using against him in their accusations, that is, indictment, cannot be understood properly unless they look at the details of his life and work as a whole. He then begins to explain his life story to give context to his actions and decisions.
How long did he testify?
Honestly, I forget. The whole hearing took a month.
An ordeal.
Well, I've only read the transcripts.
Ordeal. The word ordeal means a very difficult or unpleasant experience that someone has to go through. It's something that feels challenging, stressful, or even painful to endure. In this scene, when the Senate aide says, "an ordeal," they are describing the month-long hearing as a tough and exhausting experience for Oppenheimer. It implies that the process was emotionally and mentally exhausting for him, as he had to justify and defend his life and decisions.
Robert here says he's not a communist.
Well, then he doesn't know enough about it.
Oh, I've read Das Kapital, all 3 volumes. Does that count?
It would make you better read than most party members.
Turgid stuff. There's some thinking. Ownership is theft.
Property.
Property?
Property, not ownership.
I'm sorry, I read it in the original German.
Turgid. The word turgid means something that is difficult to understand, overly complex, or excessively wordy. It is often used to describe writing, speech, or ideas that are dense, heavy, or hard to follow. When Oppenheimer refers to Das Kapital as turgid stuff, he's saying that it's a challenging and dense read with overly complicated ideas or language. This reflects the nature of Karl Marx's writing, which is known for being rich in detail, but also very theoretical and hard to digest for some readers.
You're a physicist, you pick and choose rules? Or do you use the discipline to channel your energies into progress?
I like a little wiggle room. Do you always toe the party line?
I like my wiggle room, too.
Toe the party line. The phrase, toe the party line, means to strictly follow the rules, beliefs, or policies of a group or organization, particularly a political party, without questioning or deviating from them. It implies conformity and obedience, even if you personally disagree with some aspects of what the group stands for. In the dialogue, Oppenheimer asks Tatlock if she always strictly follows the rules or beliefs of her political group, that is, toe the party line. He's questioning if she ever thinks independently, while hinting at his own preference for flexibility, that is, a little wiggle room.
I tried to poison my tutor.
Did you hate him?
I liked him very much.
You just needed to get laid.
It took my analysts 2 years, and I don't think they ever put it that succinctly.
You have everyone convinced you're more complicated than you actually are.
We're all simple souls, I guess.
I'm not.
Succinctly. The word succinctly means expressing something clearly and briefly, using as few words as possible to get the point across. When Oppenheimer says, "I'm not sure they ever put it that succinctly," he's jokingly comparing how quickly and directly Tatlock summed up his issues when she said, "You just needed to get laid," compared to his analysts, who likely spent 2 years over-analyzing and discussing his problems in a more complicated way.
Let's get some sleep. That Mesa we saw today, one of my favorite places in the world. Tomorrow we'll climb it.
Mesa. A mesa is a landform that looks like a flat-topped hill or mountain with steep sides. The word mesa comes from Spanish and literally means table, because its flat surface resembles a table's top. Mesas are common in dry, desert regions like New Mexico, where erosion wears away the surrounding land but leaves these flat-topped elevations standing. In the dialogue, Oppenheimer talks about Los Alamos, a specific mesa in New Mexico that later became famous as the site of the Manhattan Project, where the atomic bomb was developed.
Joe got himself killed first time he popped his head out of the trench. Ideology got Joe killed for nothing.
Spanish Republic isn't nothing.
My husband offered both our futures to stop one fascist bullet from embedding itself in a mud bank. That's the definition of nothing.
Seems a little reductive.
Pragmatic.
Reductive. The word reductive refers to oversimplifying something complex to the point of losing its deeper meaning or nuance. It often implies dismissing important details or reducing an idea to something much less significant than it actually is. In this dialogue, Oppenheimer says Kitty's comment is reductive because she's minimizing her late husband's sacrifice for the Spanish Republic, reducing it to nothing. In his view, Joe's fight for the Spanish Republic and against fascism was part of a greater cause, not just a futile act.
My husband offered both our futures to stop one fascist bullet from embedding itself in a mud bank. That's the definition of nothing.
Seems a little reductive.
Pragmatic.
Pragmatic. Pragmatic means being practical, realistic, and focused on what works or is effective, rather than being driven by emotions, ideals, or abstract principles. A pragmatic person prioritizes real-world outcomes over theoretical or moral considerations. In this dialogue, Kitty calls herself pragmatic to justify her view. While Oppenheimer sees her perspective as overly simplistic, that is, reductive, she defends it as being realistic. acknowledging the futility of her late husband's sacrifice and focusing on how she moved forward with her life after his death.
I was chair of the AEC, but it wasn't me that brought the charges against Robert.
Who did?
Some former staff member of the Joint Congressional Committee. He was a rabid anti-communist named Borton.
Rabid. Rabid is often used metaphorically to describe someone who is extremely passionate, intense, or fanatical about a particular belief, cause, or idea, usually to the point of being unreasonable or overly aggressive. The word originates from rabies, a disease that causes animals to act uncontrollably. But in this context, it means excessive enthusiasm or fixation. Here, Strauss refers to William Borden as a rabid anti-communist, meaning Borden was intensely and aggressively opposed to communism, likely to an extreme degree. This exaggerates how strongly Borden felt about the issue, enough to take significant actions, such as writing to the FBI.
I built the Pentagon. The brass likes it so much, they made me take over the Manhattan Engineer District.
Which is?
But don't be a smartass. You know damn well what it is. You and half of every physics department across the country. That's problem number one.
The brass. In this context, the brass is an informal term used to refer to high-ranking military officers or leaders in an organization, particularly in the armed forces. It is a colloquial way to describe those in positions of authority, often those who make important decisions. The term comes from the gold-colored insignia, medals, and decorations that high-ranking military personnel often wear, symbolizing their authority and rank. Over time, the brass became a metaphor for senior military leadership. When General Groves says, "The brass likes it so much," he means that the senior officers or military leadership admired his work on building the Pentagon so much that they assigned him to lead the Manhattan Engineer District, which was the code name for the Manhattan Project.
Now I'm looking for a project director.
And my name came up.
Nope. Even though you brought quantum physics to America, which made me curious.
What if you found out?
You're a dilettante, a womanizer, a suspected communist.
I'm a New Deal Democrat.
I said suspected.
Dilettante. Dilettante refers to someone who takes an interest in a subject, especially in the arts or sciences, but only in a superficial or casual way, rather than with deep expertise or commitment. It can imply a lack of dedication or professionalism. In this dialogue, Groves uses the term dilettante to describe Oppenheimer as someone who might dabble or lack focus, rather than being fully committed or reliable.
Unstable, theatrical, egotistical, neurotic.
Nothing good? No? Not even he's brilliant, but...
Well, brilliance is taken for granted in your circle, so no.
Neurotic. Neurotic refers to someone who tends to be overly anxious, worried, or emotionally unstable. It's used to describe behavior characterized by excessive nervousness, insecurity, or an inability to handle stress calmly. In this dialogue, when Groves mentions neurotic, he's relaying how others have described Oppenheimer based on their impressions or suspicions, rather than judging him directly.
I've been thinking about implosion. Explosives around the sphere blast inwards, crushing the material.
I'd like to investigate that idea.
I'll talk to Ordnance, get you blowing things up.
Ordnance. Ordnance refers to military weapons, ammunition, explosives, or equipment used in combat and warfare. It can also refer to a division or department responsible for the development, storage, or management of these materials. In this dialogue, Oppenheimer mentions the Ordnance Division, referring to the group responsible for handling explosives and weaponry for the Manhattan Project.
Heisenberg sought me out in Copenhagen. It was chilling. My old student working for the Nazis. He told me some things to draw me out. Sustained fission reactions in uranium.
Draw someone out. Draw someone out means to encourage or provoke someone to share information, express their thoughts, or reveal something that they might not otherwise have said. It often implies using subtle or strategic methods to get the person to open up. When Bohr says, "He told me things to draw me out," he is suggesting that Werner Heisenberg tried to provoke a response or gain information from him during their conversation in Copenhagen.
Military targets. But there aren't any big enough.
Perhaps a vital war plant with workers housed nearby.
And we could issue a warning to reduce civilian casualties.
I'd send everything they have up against us, and I'd be up in that plane.
If we announce it and it fails to go off, we'd scupper any chance of a Japanese surrender.
Scupper. To scupper something means to ruin, wreck, or spoil something. Basically, to mess it up so badly that it fails completely. It's like sinking a boat on purpose, which is where the term originally comes from. But in modern language, it's often used to talk about plans or opportunities that are deliberately or accidentally ruined. In the scene, Bush says, "If we announce it and it fails to go off, we'd scupper any chance of Japanese surrender." He's saying that if they publicly announce the use of the bomb and it doesn't work, it would completely ruin their chances of convincing Japan to surrender. The failure would undermine their threat, their credibility, and their strategy for ending the war.
Let's call in to tell you the implosion test failed.
Hello, Hans? Yes, he's here. Yes. Is he wrong?
No.
No?
No.
So we're about to fire a dud.
No. Explain. Well, I can't. I just know the implosion lenses will work.
Dud. A dud refers to something that fails to work as intended, particularly an explosive device that doesn't detonate. It is often used to describe a bomb or weapon that malfunctions and does not achieve the desired result. Figuratively, it can also mean any effort, event, or attempt that turns out to be a failure. When Oppenheimer asks, "So we're about to fire a dud?" he is questioning whether the atomic bomb they are about to test will fail to detonate as planned.
What did Fermi mean by atmospheric ignition?
Well, we had a moment where it looked like the chain reaction from an atomic device might never stop. Setting fire to the atmosphere.
Well, why is Fermi still taking side bets on it?
Call it gallows humor.
Gallows humor. Gallows humor is when people joke about very serious, dark, or even life-and-death situations, stuff that really shouldn't be funny. It's a type of humor used to cope with fear, stress, or hopelessness. The name comes from the idea of someone cracking a joke while standing on the gallows, that is, a platform where people were executed by hanging. It's how some people deal with scary or grim realities, by laughing even when the situation is no laughing matter. In the scene, Oppenheimer explains that when Fermi joked about taking side bets on atmospheric ignition, which refers to the horrifying possibility that the atomic bomb could ignite the Earth's atmosphere and destroy all life, it was an example of gallows humor. Essentially, Fermi's dark joke is his way of dealing with the terrifying possibility of creating a global catastrophe. Even though the situation is deadly serious, joking about it helps lighten the emotional weight, at least for a moment.
Everybody down! Do not turn around until you see light reflected on the hills. Then look at the explosion only through your welder's glass.
90 seconds to detonation.
Welder's glass. Welder's glass is a special type of very dark, protective glass used in welding. It's designed to shield your eyes from extremely bright light, like the intense glare and ultraviolet rays produced by welding arcs, which can otherwise cause serious eye damage. In the scene, the welder's glass is mentioned as a safety measure for observing the atomic bomb test. The observers are warned to look at the explosion only through the welder's glass, and only after seeing the light reflected off the hills.
I would like to know what document Mr. Robb is quoting from and if we might be furnished with a copy.
The document is classified, Mr. Garrison.
I think we should get back to first-hand information.
This is first-hand.
How so, Roger?
There was a recording of the interview.
You let my client sit here and potentially perjure himself, and all this time, you had a recording?
Perjure. To perjure oneself means to lie under oath in a legal or formal proceeding. If someone gives false information while they are sworn to tell the truth, they commit perjury, which is a crime. In simple terms, perjuring yourself means lying while you're supposed to be honest in a legal setting, like in court. In this scene, Garrison is upset because the board, represented by Robb, has a recording of an interview that could contain evidence of what Oppenheimer previously said. However, they didn't disclose this recording earlier. Instead, they allowed Oppenheimer to speak during this hearing without knowing the recording existed. Garrison is essentially accusing Robb and the board of creating a situation where Oppenheimer might unknowingly contradict himself or give incorrect answers compared to what's on the recording. This could make it look like he's lying under oath, that is, perjuring himself, when, in reality, he might simply not remember details from 12 years ago, as Garrison points out.
It was 12 years ago. Can we hear this recording?
You don't have the clearance, Mr. Garrison.
You're reading it into the record.
Please, please. Is this proceeding interested in entrapment or in truth? If it's truth, where's the disclosure?
Entrapment. Entrapment usually refers to the act of luring or tricking someone into committing a wrongdoing, often used in legal contexts when law enforcement officers induce a person to commit a crime that they wouldn't have otherwise committed. More casually, it can just mean maneuvering someone into a difficult or incriminating position. Garrison points out that the way this proceeding is being handled feels less like an honest attempt to uncover the truth and more like a setup to make Oppenheimer look guilty or incriminate him. In this scene, entrapment suggests the proceeding might be unfair and manipulative. It reflects the tension and the feeling of being targeted or scrutinized in a way that isn't entirely just.
Please, please. Is this proceeding interested in entrapment or in truth? If it's truth, where's the disclosure? Where's the witness list?
Mr. Garrison, this isn't a trial, as you are well aware. Evidentiary rules do not apply. We are dealing with national security.
Evidentiary rules. Evidentiary rules are the legal rules that decide what evidence can or cannot be used in a court trial. These rules ensure that the evidence presented is reliable, relevant, and fair. For example, hearsay, that is, rumors, is often not allowed under these rules because it might not be trustworthy. In simple terms, evidentiary rules are like guidelines for what proof or information can be shown during a legal trial to make the process fair. In this scene, Gray is telling Garrison that the proceeding they are part of isn't a formal trial, so the usual evidentiary rules, which control how evidence is presented or used, don't apply here. He emphasizes that the matter is about national security, which means different rules or standards are being used, likely less strict ones.
We are dealing with national security.
Yes, sir, with all due respect, I fail to see how national security prevents the prosecution from providing
Perhaps
us
we
with
are
a
in
list
need
of
of a
witnesses.
brief recess.
Gentlemen, you have my words. If you say they're from a transcript, then I'll accept it. I've already explained I made up a cock and bull story.
Cock and bull story. A cock and bull story is a made-up tale or explanation that is usually exaggerated, false, or not believable. It's essentially a lie, often told to cover up the truth or avoid dealing with something uncomfortable. The phrase originates from Old English folklore, where fanciful and absurd tales about animals, like cocks and bulls, were shared as entertainment. Over time, it has come to mean any story that sounds suspiciously unbelievable or deliberately concocted. In this scene, Oppenheimer admits to fabricating a cock and bull story, meaning he made up something dishonest or untrue rather than being straightforward and truthful.
After the Russian A-bomb test, did Dr. Lawrence come to see you about the hydrogen bomb?
You'd be better off asking him.
I fully intend to.
Would you say that Dr. Oppenheimer was unalterably opposed to the H-bomb?
No, he thought that a fusion program would come at the expense of our awfully good fission program.
But that proved not to be the case.
In the event, both could be done.
Unalterably opposed. Unalterably opposed means being firmly against something in a manner that cannot be changed or reversed. If someone is unalterably opposed to a policy, it means they will not support it under any circumstances, and their stance is final. In the scene, Gray asks if Dr. Oppenheimer was unalterably opposed, meaning if he had an extreme and unchangeable objection to the hydrogen bomb's development.
It appears to most scientists around this country that Robert Oppenheimer is now being pilloried and put through an ordeal because he expressed his honest opinions.
Pilloried. Pilloried means publicly criticized, ridiculed, or humiliated, often in a harsh and unfair way. The term originally referred to a punishment in which a person was locked in a wooden framework, that is, a pillory, and subjected to public shame, but it is now used metaphorically. In this dialogue, Bush says that Oppenheimer is being pilloried, meaning he is being harshly and unfairly criticized or attacked by others, likely referring to the scrutiny and humiliation Oppenheimer faces during his security hearing for expressing his honest opinions.
You're referring to the hostility of certain scientists directed toward Mr. Strauss because of his commitment to security, as demonstrated in the Oppenheimer affair?
No, because of the personal vindictiveness he demonstrated against Dr. Oppenheimer.
Vindictiveness. Vindictiveness means an urge to get revenge or to hurt someone as payback. It's like wanting revenge, but in a more personal or petty way, doing things out of anger or bitterness rather than fairness or justice. In this scene, Senator Pastore mentions hostility toward Mr. Strauss, but Hill disagrees and points out something deeper. Hill accuses Strauss of personal vindictiveness against Dr. Oppenheimer and others who didn't agree with him.
The Oppenheimer matter was initiated and carried through largely through the animus of Louis Strauss. Oppenheimer made mincemeat out of Strauss's position on the shipments of isotopes to Norway, and Strauss never forgave him this public humiliation.
Make mincemeat of someone. The phrase, make mincemeat of someone, is an idiom that means to completely defeat, dismantle, or humiliate someone, usually in an argument or debate. In this context, when Hill says Oppenheimer made mincemeat out of Strauss's position, it means that Oppenheimer completely discredited or humiliated Strauss during the debate over the shipments of isotopes to Norway.
Doctor, during your work on the hydrogen bomb, were you deterred by any moral qualms?
Yes, of course.
But you still got on with your work, didn't you?
Yes, because this was work of exploration. It was not the preparation of a weapon.
You mean it was more of an academic excursion?
No, it is not an academic thing. Whether you can build a hydrogen bomb, it's a matter of life and death.
By 1942, you were actively pushing the development of the hydrogen bomb, weren't you?
Pushing is not the right word. Supporting it and working on it, yes.
Excursion. The word excursion generally means a short trip or journey, typically taken for pleasure, exploration, or a specific purpose. In a figurative sense, excursion can refer to a venture into a particular activity or field of study without a deep or long-term commitment. In the context of this dialogue, Rob uses academic excursion sarcastically to question Oppenheimer's description of developing the hydrogen bomb. Rob implies whether Oppenheimer treated the project like a detached, intellectual exploration, rather than seriously considering the devastating moral consequences of the weapon.
How many were killed or injured?
70,000.
70,000 at both Hiroshima and...
110,000 in both.
On the day of each bombing?
Yes.
And in the weeks and years that followed?
It has been put at somewhere between 50 and 100,000.
220,000 dead at least.
Yes.
Any moral scruples about that?
Terrible ones.
Scruples. The word scruples refers to feelings of doubt, hesitation, or moral concern about whether an action is right or wrong. A person with scruples questions the ethical or moral implications of their decisions or actions, often guided by their conscience. When Rob asks Oppenheimer, "Did you have moral scruples about that?" he is inquiring whether Oppenheimer experienced moral hesitation or ethical concerns regarding the massive loss of life caused by the bombing of Hiroshima.
Did you think that if you let them tar and feather you, then the world would forgive you? It won't.
We'll see.
Tar and feather. The phrase tar and feather refers to a form of punishment and public humiliation in which someone is smeared with hot tar and then covered with feathers. Historically, this was used as a form of mob justice to shame or punish individuals by making them look ridiculous and causing them physical discomfort. While it was an actual physical practice, the phrase is now often used metaphorically. In this dialogue, Kitty is using tar and feather metaphorically to suggest that Oppenheimer allowed himself to be publicly humiliated during the hearings or his political battles. She implies that even though he has endured this disgrace, it won't lead to forgiveness or redemption from the world. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. On your screen now is a list of all the words we discussed in this video, so feel free to pause and review them if you need a quick recap.